My ex-wife betrayed me, walked out on our kids, and then had the nerve to demand I fund her stepkid's life. So I dragged her to court, and what happened next left her reeling. The divorce papers were sitting on my kitchen table, right next to a cold cup of coffee and a half-eaten Pop-Tart that my son, Lucas, had abandoned before running off to play with his Legos. I stood there, frozen, staring at the stack of legal jargon like it was a loaded gun pointed at my chest. My hands shook as I picked up the top sheet, the words, "Dissolution of marriage," screaming at me in bold black ink. Sarah, my wife of 3 years, hadn't said a word about this. Not a hint, not a whisper, just dropped this bomb and left me to clean up the shrapnel. I'm Ethan Caldwell, a 32-year-old carpenter from Willow Creek, Oregon, and I thought I had a life figured out. A modest house, 2 kids who light up my world, and a marriage that wasn't perfect, but wasn't supposed to end like this. How the hell did I get here? Willow Creek is the kind of place you see on postcards, tucked between rolling hills draped in pine forests that stretch out like a green ocean. The air smells of sap and damp earth, and in the mornings, mist clings to the creeks that snake through town, catching the sunlight like 1,000 tiny mirrors. My workshop, a converted barn behind our house, sits at the edge of a clearing where deer sometimes wander in at dusk, their eyes glowing in the fading light. It's the kind of small town where folks wave from their porches, where the diner serves bottomless coffee for $2, and where everyone knows your business, whether you like it or not. That's where I met Sarah 4 years ago, at the Harvest Festival, under a canopy of sycamore trees strung with fairy lights. She was 26, radiant in a red sweater, laughing as she bit into a caramel apple. I was a lanky carpenter with sawdust in my hair, trying to play it cool while spilling cider all over my boots. We clicked, or so I thought, and 6 months later, we were married in a little chapel by Mirror Lake, with the hills glowing crimson in the sunset. Those early days were pure magic. Sarah and I spent weekends fixing up the old cedar shingle house I'd built with my own hands. We painted the walls sage green because she said it felt like breathing in a forest. We'd stay up late sipping cheap wine on the porch swing, planning a future that felt as solid as the oak beams in our roof. When Lucas came along, everything got brighter. I'd cradle him in the nursery, his tiny fists clutching my finger, while moonlight spilled through the window, painting the pine floor in silver streaks. I'd sing him old Johnny Cash tunes, my voice cracking as I tried not to wake Sarah. That kid had my blue eyes and her crooked smile, and I'd have walked through fire for him. Hell, I still would. But somewhere along the line, the music stopped. After Lucas was born, Sarah changed. It wasn't just the sleepless nights or the diaper marathons. Those I could handle. It was the way she'd look right through me, her hazel eyes glued to her phone while I rambled about my day at the workshop. I'd come home smelling of cedar and sweat, arms aching from carving custom cabinets, only to find her snapping about dishes I hadn't washed, or how I'd left sawdust on the porch again. "You're never here, Ethan," she'd say, barely glancing up from her screen. Never here? I was pulling 10-hour shifts to cover the mortgage, then staying up till 2 a.m. to rock Lucas back to sleep so she could catch a break. I tried everything: pancakes at dawn, late-night talks, even planning a date to the lakeside bistro where we had our first kiss. I bought her a pearl necklace she'd eyed at the town jeweler, thinking it'd spark something, but when I handed it to her, wrapped in a velvet box under the glow of candlelight, she just sighed. "Thanks," she said, flat as a board, and went back to scrolling Instagram. That night, driving home along the winding road past the pine groves, I felt the first crack in my heart. Then Emma came along, barely a year after Lucas. I was over the moon again, holding my daughter in the hospital, her tiny nose scrunched up like she was already judging the world. But the joy was short-lived. Sarah's distance grew into a chasm. She'd take her phone to the bathroom, step outside to get some air during dinner, and flip it face down the second I walked into the room. One night, I woke up to check on Emma and saw her phone glowing in the dark. 2:17 a.m. A text from some guy named Ryan. "Missed you at the office today. Call me tomorrow." My stomach twisted. Ryan was her co-worker at the ad agency in town, a slick type who wore tailored suits and probably spent more on hair gel than I did on groceries. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I just watched, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Tuesday in October, the kind of crisp morning where the air smells like apples and wood smoke. I came home from the workshop, my truck rattling down the gravel drive, and found the divorce papers on the kitchen table. Lucas was stacking Legos in the living room, humming to himself, while Emma napped in her swing, her soft breaths barely audible over the creak of the floorboards. Sarah stood by the sink, arms crossed, her face hard as the granite countertops I'd installed last spring. "I'm done, Ethan," she said, her voice cold as the autumn wind rattling the windows. "I deserve better than this. You're just not enough." Not enough! The words hit like a sledgehammer. I wanted to scream, to show her the calluses on my hands from building our life, the bank statements drained to keep us afloat, the texts I'd sent begging her to talk, but I looked at Lucas, his little hands fumbling with a blue Lego brick, and swallowed the rage. "Is it Ryan?" I asked, my voice low, steady, like I was bracing for a storm. She didn't flinch. "This isn't about someone else. It's about us not working." Not a denial. That's when I knew. We split everything 50/50/50, house, savings, custody, no alimony, no child support, since we both had decent jobs. I moved out the next week, leaving behind the house I'd built, the nursery I'd painted, the life I thought was mine. My new place was a one-bedroom apartment above the hardware store in town, with a balcony overlooking Willow Creek, where mallards glided on the water at dawn. The first night, I sat on the bare floor, a single mattress in the corner, scrolling through photos of Lucas and Emma until my phone died. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl in the pines. I felt like I'd been gutted, like someone had carved out my insides and left me hollow. Being a single dad was like learning to walk on a tightrope. Lucas, barely 2, would cling to my leg during custody exchanges, his big eyes searching mine like he knew something was wrong. Emma, still a baby, would wail when I handed her back to Sarah in the supermarket parking lot, the asphalt glinting under the streetlights. I learned to braid Emma's hair, to make Lucas's favorite PB&J sandwiches with the crusts cut off, to stay calm when he spiked a fever at 3 a.m., and I had to call my mom in a panic. Those early days were brutal, but they were also everything. I'd take the kids to the park by the creek, where we'd skip stones and chase fireflies as the sun dipped behind the hills. Lucas would ask, "Why don't you live with us, Daddy?" And I'd fumble for an answer, my throat tight. "Mommy and Daddy love you so much, buddy, but we're better parents in different houses." He'd nod, like he got it, but the question lingered in his eyes. A year later, Sarah married Tom Harper, a real estate hotshot who drove a shiny BMW and lived in a McMansion on the edge of town, where the hills bloomed with crimson maples every fall. Tom had a daughter, Mia, the same age as Lucas, and they had a son, Owen, soon after. The first time I met Tom was at Lucas's preschool recital, held in the community center with its creaky wooden stage and faded red curtains. He sauntered up, all polished shoes and cologne, flashing a grin like he was selling me a condo. "Ethan, right? Heard a lot about you," he said, his handshake too firm, his eyes too smug. I forced a smile, my jaw tight. Wish I could say the same. He laughed too loud, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old buddies. "Lucas is a great kid, already teaching Mia how to build a mean sandcastle." Something about the way he claimed my son made my blood simmer, but I kept it cool for Lucas, who was waving from the stage, clutching a tiny tambourine. Things got messy fast. Sarah started pushing me to treat Mia like my own. It began with small stuff, buying birthday gifts for her, including her in my weekend outings with Lucas and Emma. "It's not fair to Mia if you leave her out," Sarah said, her voice dripping with that sanctimonious tone she'd mastered. We were standing in her driveway, the McMansion looming behind her, its windows glowing gold against the dusk. I kept my voice steady. "Sarah, my time with Lucas and Emma is limited. I'm their dad, not Mia's." Her eyes narrowed. "Wow, Ethan, way to make a little girl feel like an outsider. Real classy." I bit back a retort, watching Lucas kick a soccer ball across the lawn, oblivious to the tension. I wasn't the bad guy here, but damn if she didn't make me feel like one. Tom didn't help. He'd show up at school events always with some passive-aggressive jab. At the spring fair, under a canopy of blooming cherry blossoms, he cornered me by the cotton candy stand. "Nice truck, Ethan," he said, nodding at my beat-up Ford, its paint chipped from years of hauling lumber. "Must be nice not having to worry about a big family budget." I clenched my fists, the sweet scent of sugar mixing with the bile in my throat. "It gets the job done," I said, turning away before I said something I'd regret. But he kept going, loud enough for other parents to hear. "Blended families take sacrifice, you know. Not everyone gets that." I wanted to deck him, right there in front of the balloon animals and face-painting booth, but Lucas was nearby, laughing as he tossed a beanbag at a carnival game. So I walked away, my boots crunching on the gravel, my pulse hammering. The real kicker came when I suggested sending Lucas and Emma to Willow Creek Arts Academy, a private school known for its music and painting programs. Lucas had a knack for sketching landscapes that looked like they belonged in a gallery, and Emma, at 3, was already stringing together poems that made her preschool teacher tear up. The tuition was steep, $10,000, 0 cents a year per kid. But I'd been saving for years, cutting corners, skipping vacations, driving that same rusty truck. I pitched the idea to Sarah during a custody exchange, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked pines. "It's a game-changer for them," I said, leaning against my truck. "I'll cover the full cost." Her response? A calculated smile. "That's great, Ethan, but what about Mia? It's not fair if she's left out." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. "You want me to pay for Tom's kid to go to private school?" She crossed her arms. "They're siblings now. You can't just pick and choose who gets opportunities." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was unreal. "Sarah, I'm their dad, not a damn ATM for your new family." Her face hardened and she stormed back into the house, leaving me standing in the drizzle, my heart pounding like a war drum. That was just the beginning. Sarah and Tom started weaving this narrative that I was the villain, the selfish ex who refused to embrace their blended family. They'd guilt-trip me at every turn, saying Lucas and Emma were confused when I took them on outings without Mia, or that I was creating division by not buying her Christmas presents. One night, Lucas came back from their place quieter than usual, his eyes fixed on the floor as we ate burgers at the diner. "What's up, buddy?" I asked, dipping a fry in ketchup. He hesitated, then mumbled, "Mom says it's mean that you don't take Mia to the lake with us." I nearly choked. "Did she now?" I kept my tone light, but inside I was seething. "You know I love spending time with you and Emma, right? That's our special time." He nodded, but the doubt in his eyes gutted me. Sarah was planting seeds, and they were taking root. The tension kept building, like a storm rolling in over the hills. Tom started calling Lucas and Emma our kids at school events, loud enough for everyone to hear, like he was staking a claim. At a parent-teacher night, under the fluorescent lights of the school gym, he clapped me on the back and said, "The kids are thriving with us, Ethan." Must be tough only seeing them half the time. I forced a smile, my jaw so tight it ached, and walked away to talk to Lucas' teacher about his latest drawing. A sketch of Willow Creek at sunrise, all bold lines and vibrant colors. But Tom's words stuck, like a splinter under my skin. Then came the bombshell that nearly broke me. Lucas and Emma got accepted into a prestigious art camp in Montana, one of only 50 kids nationwide. Lucas had submitted a portfolio of sketches that could make a grown man cry, and Emma's poem about a sparrow in the rain had the camp director calling her a prodigy. We were at my apartment, the kids sprawled on the rug, when the acceptance emails came through. Lucas read his first, his eyes wide as saucers. "Dad, I got in," he shouted, and Emma, not to be outdone, scrambled to check hers. The room erupted in cheers, the kids jumping on the couch, the golden light of dusk streaming through the balcony doors. I promised them new sketch pads and took them to the diner for milkshakes, where we toasted with chocolate syrup and goofy grins. The camp cost $9,000, 0 cents, per kid, plus travel. Nearly $20,000, 0 cents total. I didn't blink. I'd been saving for moments like this, living lean so my kids could soar. I mentioned the camp to Sarah during our next custody exchange, expecting her to be proud. Instead, she got that look. the one that said she was about to turn my joy into a battlefield. "That's amazing," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "But Mia's really into art too. It'd be so good for all three of them to go together." I stared at her, the creek behind her house gurgling softly, the air thick with the scent of wet grass. "Sarah, this isn't a family vacation. Lucas and Emma earned this. It's competitive." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You're so selfish, Ethan. You want to split up their family? Mia deserves this too, and you should pay for it since you're covering the others." I laughed, a short, bitter sound that echoed off the hills. "You want me to drop 10 grand on Tom's kid? Are you out of your mind?" Her eyes flashed. "They're siblings now. You're hurting them by treating Mia differently." I stepped back, my boots sinking into the muddy lawn. "This isn't about Mia. It's about you trying to bleed me dry." She smirked, a cold, calculated thing. "We'll see what the kids think about that." The next day, Lucas called me, his voice small over the phone. "Mom says we shouldn't go to camp if Mia can't go. She said it's not fair." My heart sank, heavy as the oak logs I'd been hauling all day. I pulled over on the side of the road, the pines casting long shadows across my truck. "Buddy, you and Emma worked hard for this. You deserve it. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about that, okay?" He mumbled an okay, but I could hear the guilt in his voice, and it tore me apart. Sarah was playing dirty, using my own kids as pawns, and I was done playing nice. Week later, Tom sent me an email that made my blood boil. "We need to discuss your contribution to our household expenses," it read, like I was some deadbeat tenant. Attached was a spreadsheet breaking down their $3,000.00 monthly mortgage, with a column suggesting I chip in half for the kids' stability. I was in my workshop, surrounded by the scent of sawdust and varnish, when I read it. I nearly threw my phone across the room. Contribute to their McMansion? The one Tom bragged about at every school event, with its granite countertops and heated floors? I ignored the email, but the audacity gnawed at me, like termites in the beams of my life. The final straw came at a custody exchange, under a sky bruised with storm clouds. Sarah handed me a letter, typed up like we were in a damn boardroom, demanding I cover half their mortgage and Mia's art classes to ensure an equitable environment for Lucas and Emma. Tom stood behind her, arms crossed, smirking like he'd already won. "A real man steps up for his family," he said, his voice loud enough for Lucas to hear from the car. I stepped closer, my voice low, steady, but burning. "A real man pays his own damn bills, Tom, and he doesn't use kids to extort his wife's ex." Sarah gasped, like I'd slapped her. "This is about co-parenting, Ethan, not money." I laughed, a cold, hollow sound that cut through the humid air. "Co-parenting? This is you trying to bankroll your dream house with my paycheck. I'm done." I called the kids over, helped them into the truck, and drove off, the rearview mirror showing Sarah and Tom standing in the driveway, their faces twisted with rage. That night, I sat on my balcony, a beer in hand, the creek below reflecting the first stars. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I the asshole here? Was I hurting my kids by not playing along with this blended family fantasy? I called my buddy Jake, who'd been through a nasty divorce himself. "Man, am I screwing this up?" I asked, my voice rough. "Should I be helping with their bills?" Jake didn't miss a beat. "Hell no, Ethan. You take care of Lucas and Emma. School, clothes, camp, whatever they need. Their mortgage? That's Tom's problem, not yours. Don't let them gaslight you into thinking you're the bad guy." He was right, but the guilt trips were relentless, like waves eroding a cliff. I had to draw a line, or I'd lose myself. The next morning, I got a call from Lucas's teacher, Mrs. Larson. "Ethan, can you come to the school? Sarah and Tom requested a meeting with the counselor." I drove over, the road winding through pines that swayed in the breeze, my stomach churning. I walked into the counselor's office, expecting a routine check-in, but it was an ambush. Sarah, Tom, and the counselor sat there, faces grim, like I was on trial. Sarah spoke first, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "Ethan's inconsistent parenting is hurting the kids. He refuses to include Mia, lives in a nicer place, and it's creating tension. Tom chimed in, pulling out his phone to show photos of their family trip to the coast. Lucas and Emma smiling with Mia and Owen. See how happy they are together? But Ethan's actions are driving a wedge between them. I sat there, my face hot, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. The counselor nodded, like she was buying their act, and I felt the room closing in. Then Sarah dropped the bomb. "We're considering filing for primary custody," she said, her voice soft but sharp like a knife wrapped in silk, on grounds of emotional neglect. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Emotional neglect? Me? The guy who'd spent every spare dollar on my kid's future? Who stayed up nights teaching Lucas to draw? Who read Emma's poems like they were Shakespeare? I leaned forward, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Let me get this straight. You're threatening to take my kids because I won't pay for Mia's art camp or your mortgage?" Sarah's eyes widened, like she hadn't expected me to call her bluff. Tom jumped in, his voice rising. "You're just jealous of our family, Ethan. You're punishing the kids for it." I locked eyes with him, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Jealous? Of a guy who calls my kids a burden behind my back? Save it for the judge. The room went silent, the counselor shifting uncomfortably. I stood up, my chair scraping the floor. "We're done here. Any more of this goes through my lawyer." I walked out, my heart pounding, the pines outside blurring as I fought to keep it together. In the truck, I gripped the steering wheel, the leather worn smooth under my hands. They were trying to take my kids. My kids. The thought was a wildfire, burning through every doubt, every moment I'd second-guessed myself. I made 2 calls from the parking lot, one to a family law attorney with a reputation for being a shark, and one to Jake, who could dig up deleted texts like a digital bloodhound. This wasn't about playing nice anymore. This was war. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out of my truck, the air thick with the scent of pine and the faint tang of rain-soaked earth. Willow Creek was waking up, the morning mist curling around the hills like a lover's whisper, the creek itself glinting like a ribbon of silver under the rising sun. I'd just dropped Lucas and Emma at school, their backpacks bouncing as they ran toward the playground. Lucas's sketchbook tucked under his arm, Emma's tiny hand waving back at me. My heart swelled, but it was edged with a gnawing unease. Sarah and Tom's ambush at the counselor's office last week had lit a fuse, and I could feel the explosion coming. I wasn't wrong. Back at my workshop, a converted barn where the smell of cedar and varnish was my sanctuary, I tried to lose myself in work. I was shaping a walnut dining table for a client in Portland, the grain swirling like a river under my hands. But my mind kept drifting to Sarah's threat. Primary custody, emotional neglect. The words looped in my head, each one a splinter digging deeper. I'd spent years building a life for Lucas and Emma. Every extra shift, every skipped beer with the guys, every dime saved for their future. And now, because I wouldn't bankroll Tom's kid or their McMansion, they were coming for my kids. My kids. The thought was a match to gasoline, and I had to set the sander down before I ruined the table. My phone buzzed on the workbench, cutting through the hum of the radio playing Springsteen's Born to Run. It was an email from Sarah, subject line, "For the kids' sake." I braced myself, wiping sawdust off my hands, and opened it. The words hit like a sucker punch. "We're enrolling Lucas and Emma in Willow Creek Arts Academy. It's the best thing for their talents. Mia's going too, and we expect you to contribute to her tuition to keep things fair. It's only $10,000, 0 cents a year. Let's discuss this like adults." I stared at the screen, my jaw tight enough to crack a walnut. 10 grand for Tom's daughter? The same woman who'd left divorce papers on my kitchen table now thought I owed her stepkid an education? I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the barn's rafters, and slammed the phone down. The nerve of these people. I leaned against the workbench, the cool wood grounding me, and thought back to the moment I'd pitched the Arts Academy to Sarah. It was a crisp evening, the sky over Willow Creek streaked with pink and gold, the kind of sunset that made you believe in second chances. I'd driven to her place, a sprawling house on the hill with crimson maples framing the driveway, and laid out my plan. "Lucas's sketches are unreal, Sarah. And Emma's poems. She's 3 and writing better than I ever could. The Arts Academy could set them up for life. I'll cover the full $20,000, 0 cents, for both of them. Her response wasn't pride or excitement, it was a calculated tilt of her head, like a poker player sizing up a bluff. That's great, Ethan, but what about Mia? She's got talent too. It's not fair to leave her out. It stood there, the evening breeze carrying the scent of her lavender garden, and felt the ground shift beneath me. I'm their dad, Sarah, not Mia's. That's on you and Tom. Her lips had tightened, and she'd walked back inside without another word, leaving me staring at the glowing windows of their perfect little world. Now this email. It wasn't a request. It was a demand, dressed up in co-parenting jargon. I forwarded it to my lawyer, Rachel Nguyen, a no-nonsense attorney who'd built a reputation in town for tearing apart flimsy cases like a hawk with a rabbit. Then I called Jake, my buddy from high school, who'd traded his skateboard for a laptop and a knack for digital forensics. Jake, I need you to dig up every text, every email between me and Sarah, anything that shows what they're pulling. His voice crackled over the line, steady as ever. On it, man. These clowns are about to learn they picked the wrong fight. I hung up, the barn's quiet wrapping around me, and got back to sanding. Each stroke a promise to protect what was mine. The next few days were a tightrope walk. I kept things normal for the kids. Homework at the kitchen table, pizza nights on the balcony overlooking the creek, where fireflies danced like tiny lanterns. Lucas was sketching a deer he'd seen in the woods, his pencil scratching softly while Emma recited a poem about a frog she'd spotted by the water. "Daddy, does the frog miss his family when he hops away?" she asked, her big eyes searching mine. I pulled her onto my lap, her curls tickling my chin. "Nah, kiddo, frogs always find their way back to the pond, just like we always find each other." She giggled, and for a moment the world felt right. But the weight of Sarah's threat hung over me, a storm cloud waiting to burst. It broke on a Friday, during a custody exchange at the supermarket parking lot. The lot was half empty, the asphalt shimmering under the noon sun. The air heavy with the smell of hot pavement and blooming jasmine from a nearby planter. Sarah handed over the kids' backpacks, her face a mask of forced calm. Lucas climbed into the truck, clutching his sketchbook, while Emma babbled about a butterfly she'd seen. Then Sarah leaned in, her voice low, like she was sharing a secret. "Ethan, we need to talk about the Arts Academy. Mia's enrolled, and Tom's parents are covering her tuition, but it's not fair for Lucas and Emma to go if you're not contributing to her too." I stared at her, the keys dangling in my hand. "You're kidding, right? I'm already paying for our kids." "Mia's not my responsibility." Her eyes flashed, and she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You're so damn selfish. They're siblings now. You're tearing them apart by treating Mia differently." I gripped the keys so hard they bit into my palm. "Tearing them apart? You're the one trying to guilt me into funding your husband's kid. That's not co-parenting, Sarah. That's extortion." She flinched, but before she could respond, Tom appeared, striding across the lot like he owned it, his polo shirt screaming country club vibes. "Problem, Ethan?" he said, his smirk sharp enough to cut glass. A real man would step up for the whole family, not just cherry-pick his kids. I turned to him, my voice low, steady, but laced with fire. A real man doesn't use kids as pawns to shake down his wife's ex. Back off, Tom. He opened his mouth, but I was already climbing into the truck, slamming the door. Lucas looked at me from the back seat, his eyes wide. "Dad, why's Mom mad?" I forced a smile, my heart pounding. "Just grown-up stuff, buddy. Let's grab some ice cream." That night, I sat on the balcony, a beer in hand, the creek below murmuring like it was trying to tell me something. The kids were asleep inside, their soft snores, a reminder of why I couldn't let this go. Sarah and Tom weren't just pushing boundaries, they were trying to rewrite them, to make me the villain in a story they'd scripted. I wasn't having it. I texted Rachel, attaching the latest email and a quick summary of the parking lot showdown. Her reply was immediate. "Keep everything, record every interaction. We're building a case. I leaned back, the stars above Willow Creek sharp as pinpricks, and felt a shift inside me. No more playing defense. It was time to fight. The next week, the kids got the news that changed everything. Lucas and Emma had been accepted into the Montana Art Camp, a prestigious program for only 50 kids nationwide. Lucas's portfolio of sketches, pine forests, deer at dusk, the creek at sunrise, had blown the judges away. Emma's poem, a tiny masterpiece about a sparrow braving a storm, had earned her a spot as the youngest camper. We were in my apartment, the kids sprawled on the rug, when the emails came through. I let them check my laptop, their faces lit by the screen's glow. Lucas read his first, his voice shaking. "Dad, I got in," Emma squealed, clicking hers open, and when she saw congratulations, she launched herself onto the couch, bouncing like a spring. "We're going to camp," she shouted, and Lucas joined her, the two of them laughing and hugging, the room alive with their joy. I stood there, my throat tight, the golden light of dusk spilling through the balcony doors. "You guys earned this," I said, ruffling their hair. "I'm so damn proud." We celebrated with milkshakes at the diner, chocolate syrup dripping down their chins, and I promised new sketch pads and watercolor sets for camp. It was one of those moments you want to bottle up and keep forever. I mentioned the camp to Sarah during our next co-parenting call, expecting at least a flicker of pride. Instead, her voice went cold, like ice cracking underfoot. "That's great, Ethan, but Mia's been drawing too. It'd be so good for all three of them to share this experience." I gripped the phone, staring out at the creek, its surface rippling under the morning sun. "Sarah, this isn't a family reunion. Lucas and Emma earned their spots. It's competitive, not a free-for-all." She didn't miss a beat. "You're so focused on your kids, you don't see how this hurts their bond with Mia. You should pay for her to go to a similar camp. It's only $9,000, 0 cents. I laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. $9,000 for Tom's kid? You're out of your damn mind." Her voice turned venomous. "You're going to regret this, Ethan. The kids will resent you for splitting up their family." I hung up, my hands shaking, the creek's gentle flow doing nothing to calm the storm inside me. The next day, Lucas called, his voice small and hesitant. "Dad, Mom says we shouldn't go to camp if Mia can't go. She said it's not fair to leave her out." I pulled over on the side of the road, the pines casting long shadows across my truck, and took a deep breath. "Buddy, you and Emma worked your butts off for this. You deserve it. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about that, okay?" He mumbled an okay, but I could hear the guilt, and it was like a knife twisting in my chest. Sarah was weaponizing my son, planting doubts in his head, and I was done letting her play that game. The real gut punch came a week later. I was in my workshop, the radio blaring Sweet Home Alabama, when Tom sent an email that made my blood run cold. "We need to discuss your contribution to our household expenses," it read, with a spreadsheet attached, breaking down their $3,000 0 cents mortgage and suggesting I pay half, to ensure stability for Lucas and Emma. I stared at the screen, the scent of varnish sharp in my nose, and felt a wave of heat rush through me. Contribute to their McMansion? The one Tom bragged about at every soccer game, with its wraparound deck and hot tub overlooking the hills? I forwarded it to Rachel without a word, my fingers trembling as I typed. This wasn't about stability. It was about control. About squeezing me until I broke. The tension kept building, like a storm gathering over the mountains. At the next custody exchange, under a sky heavy with gray clouds, Sarah handed me a typed letter, formal as a court summons. It demanded I cover half their mortgage and Mia's art classes to create an equitable environment for the children. Tom stood behind her, his arms crossed, his smirk practically glowing. "A real man steps up for his family, Ethan," he said, loud enough for Emma to hear as she climbed into the truck. I stepped closer, my voice low, controlled, but burning. "A real man doesn't beg his wife's ex to pay his bills, Tom, and he doesn't drag kids into his schemes." Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her chest like I'd insulted her entire bloodline. "This is about co-parenting, Ethan, not money." I laughed, a cold, sharp sound that cut through the humid air. "Co-parenting? This is you trying to turn me into your personal bank. I'm done." I helped Lucas into the truck, slammed the door, and drove off, the rear view mirror showing Tom's red face and Sarah's furious glare. That night, I sat on the balcony, the creek below reflecting the moon's silver light, and called Jake. "They're coming for everything, man," I said, my voice rough. "They want my money, my kids, my sanity." Jake didn't hesitate. "They're bluffing, Ethan. We'll bury them in evidence. Start recording every pickup, every drop-off. Get a dash cam. I'm pulling every deleted text I can find." I hung up, the night air cool against my skin, and felt a flicker of hope. Jake was right. They'd picked the wrong guy to mess with. The next blow came at a parent-teacher meeting I thought was routine. I walked into the school, a squat brick building nestled among sycamores with a cup of coffee from Joe's Diner in hand. The gym smelled of polished wood and sweat, the walls lined with kids' artwork, including Luca's sketch of a deer in the fog, all sharp lines and soft shadows. I was expecting to hear about his progress, maybe Emma's latest poem. Instead, I found Sarah, Tom, and the counselor, Ms. Carter, waiting like a tribunal. Sarah spoke first, her voice trembling with fake tears. "Ethan's parenting is causing emotional harm. He refuses to include Mia, lives in a nicer place, and it's confusing the kids." Tom pulled out his phone, showing photos of their family trip to the Oregon coast. Lucas and Emma laughing with Mia and Owen on a sandy beach. See how happy they are together? But Ethan's creating division by excluding Mia. I sat there, my coffee going cold, my pulse hammering. The counselor nodded, scribbling notes, and I felt like I was in a bad movie. Then Sarah dropped the bomb, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. "We're prepared to file for primary custody on grounds of emotional neglect." The room tilted, the air sucked out of it. Neglect? Me? The guy who'd spent every spare moment with Lucas and Emma? Who'd saved for their camp? Who'd stayed up nights teaching them to dream big? I leaned forward, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside. "You're threatening to take my kids because I won't pay for Mia's camp or your mortgage?" Sarah's eyes widened like she hadn't expected me to fight back. Tom jumped in, his voice loud, aggressive. "You're just jealous of our family, Ethan. You're punishing the kids for it." I locked eyes with him, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Jealous? Of a guy who calls my kids a burden behind my back? Save it for court?" Mrs. Carter shifted uncomfortably and I stood up, my chair scraping the floor. "We're done here. Any more of this goes through my lawyer." I walked out, the sycamores outside swaying in the wind, my heart pounding like a drum. In the truck, I sat for a moment, staring at the dashboard, the weight of their threat crushing me. They were trying to take my kids. My kids. The thought was a wildfire, burning away any doubt. I called Rachel from the parking lot, my voice shaking but resolute. "They're threatening custody. I need you to go nuclear." Her response was calm, professional, but fierce. "They just made a big mistake, Ethan. Start documenting everything. Texts, emails, pickups. We'll bury them." Then I called Jake. "I need everything you've got. Every message, every email, every dirty trick." He chuckled, a dark, determined sound. "Oh, they're gonna regret this." On it. For the next month, I went full stealth mode. On the surface, nothing changed. Same custody schedule, same smiles for the kids, same routine of homework and bedtime stories. But behind the scenes, I was building a fortress. Jake pulled 3 years of deleted texts from Sarah's old phone backups, every manipulative message, every guilt trip, every demand for money. I saved every email, including the one about Mia's camp and their mortgage. I installed a dash cam in my truck, legal in Oregon with single-party consent, and recorded every pickup and drop-off. One clip caught Tom muttering to Lucas, "Your dad doesn't get how families work, kid." Another had Sarah telling Emma, "Maybe Santa can convince your dad to help Mia's camp." I kept receipts for every expense, school fees, art supplies, doctor visits, proving I'd never neglected my kids. Rachel drafted affidavits from Lucas's art teacher and Emma's preschool coach, both praising my involvement. Every piece was a brick in my case, and I was building a wall they couldn't climb. One afternoon, at Lucas's art show in the community center, I saw the cracks in their facade. The room was warm, lit by string lights, with kids' paintings lining the walls. Lucas's was a stunning watercolor of the creek at dawn, all blues and golds. I stood in the back, clapping as he presented it, my chest tight with pride. Across the room, Tom checked his watch, bored, while Sarah took selfies with Mia. When Lucas finished, Tom headed for the exit, barely acknowledging him. I caught it all on my phone, the footage crystal clear. Later, at pickup, I recorded Tom telling the kids, "Your dad's too stubborn to help us out, so we're stuck with extra bills." My blood boiled, but I kept my cool, smiling for Lucas and Emma as we drove to the diner for burgers. The turning point came late one night, when Lucas texted me from Sarah's house. "Dad, can I come over tomorrow? Mom and Tom are fighting again. Tom said you should man up and help since they're stuck with us half the time." The words hit like a freight train. Stuck with us. My kids, my world, reduced to the burden. I screenshotted the text, my hands shaking, and added it to the evidence pile. And the next day, I picked Lucas up early, driving through a light rain, the wipers swishing like a metronome. In the truck, he stared out the window, his voice quiet. "Tom said you have a nicer place because you don't care about our family. It makes me feel like we're a problem." I pulled over, the pines blurring outside, and turned to him. "Lucas, you and Emma are the best thing in my life. You're not a problem. You're my everything. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than that." He nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. And I knew I had to end this. I filed for 70/30 custody the next week, requesting all communication go through a court-monitored app. Rachel laid out the case like a general planning a siege. Texts, recordings, receipts, Lucas's message, all organized into a damning narrative. Sarah and Tom lost it. My phone lit up with calls and texts. Sarah pleading, then raging. Tom calling me a deadbeat, who'd regret this. I didn't respond. At the next pickup, Sarah cornered me in the driveway, her voice shaking. "Is this about the camp? You're tearing our family apart." I looked her dead in the eye, the maples behind her blazing red. "No, Sarah, this is about you and Tom using our kids to get my money. Talk to my lawyer." She stammered, but I walked away, helping Emma into the truck, her tiny hand warm in mine. The weeks before the hearing were a pressure cooker. Sarah tried love-bombing the kids, buying them new tablets, taking them to the arcade on school nights, letting them stay up past bedtime. Lucas told me she'd promised a trip to Disneyland if they chose her house. Classic alienation, and I documented every bit of it. Meanwhile, I kept our routine steady. Homework, home-cooked meals, bedtime stories under the glow of a lamp shaped like a moon. Emma would curl up against me, her voice sleepy as she asked, "Daddy, are we okay?" I'd kiss her forehead, the scent of her strawberry shampoo grounding me. "We're more than okay, kiddo. We're unstoppable." The hearing was on a gray morning, the courtroom smelling of polished wood and stale coffee. Rachel presented our case like a maestro, every piece of evidence a note in a symphony. The texts showed Sarah's manipulation, the recordings caught Tom's jabs, and Lucas's message about being a burden made the judge's face harden. Sarah's lawyer stumbled, trying to paint me as uncooperative, but the judge wasn't buying it. "Mr. Caldwell has no legal obligation to support a child who is not his," she said, her voice sharp. "The evidence suggests a pattern of manipulation by the respondents." When she awarded me 70/30 custody, with communication through the app and Sarah covering my $15,000 0 cents legal fees, I didn't feel triumph, just relief, like a weight lifting off my chest. I moved us to a new house a week later, a cozy craftsman near the Arts Academy, with a backyard overlooking the pines. The kids had their own rooms, Lucas's filled with sketch pads, Emma's with poetry notebooks. That first night we ate pizza on the floor, no furniture yet, the moonlight streaming through the windows. Lucas grinned, sauce on his chin. "This feels like home, Dad." Emma nodded, her curls bouncing. "Can we paint the walls green like the old house?" I laughed, pulling them into a hug. "Anything you want, kiddo." I sent the $15,000 0 cents legal bill to Sarah and Tom via courier with a note. "My commitment is to my kids, not your lifestyle. Petty? Maybe. Necessary? Hell yes." Lucas and Emma thrived at camp, coming back with portfolios that blew me away and invitations to mentor next year. I started seeing Clara, a painter with a laugh like wind chimes, who joined us for picnic nights by the creek. One evening, as we watched fireflies dance, Lucas looked at me, his eyes steady. "I'm glad you fought for us, Dad. Things feel right now." I ruffled his hair, my heart full, the pines whispering around us. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were living.